Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving into a topic that's as relevant as it is tough to talk about: racism.
Yeah, it's definitely a heavy one.
For sure. We've got some really interesting quotes and research to unpack today, and honestly, the biggest question hanging over all of it is, like, can something so destructive really be a part of, like, being human? You know?
It makes you think, that's for sure. And the sources you've brought in, they really do offer some wild perspectives on where racism comes from and what it does to us.
Exactly. We're going to try to hit this from three angles today. First up, the whole evolutionary side of things. Then we'll look at how ideology gets tangled up with it all. And finally, we got to tackle how social Darwinism took something like science and twisted it to back up racist agendas. But before we even go there, I got to ask, have you ever, like, actually sat and thought about whether racism is learned or if it's something, I don't know, more, like, deep down in us?
It's a question people have been wrestling with forever. Actually, one of the things you sent over, that YouTube discussion titled Soru Irkshlik Dolamadir, it goes right at that question. They talk about this primal fear we have of anything other, basically just not trusting anything outside our own little group.
So, like, our inner caveman sees someone different and goes, whoa, danger, competition.
Well, it's a little more complicated, but yeah, you're getting the idea. Our ancestors, they were all about survival, right?
Yeah.
And spotting a threat, which often meant someone from another group. That was how you stayed alive. So this need to constantly be on guard, that might have kind of stuck with us, made us naturally wary of anyone different.
Huh. Makes sense, I guess. Like, walk into a room full of strangers, you get that little bit of, oof, okay. Even if you don't want to, you're a little more on edge.
Exactly. Now, super important to say here, this whole evolution thing, it's not an excuse for racism, okay? It's more like, if we're being honest, humans might have this deep down tendency.
So not why it's okay, but maybe why it happens at all.
Exactly. And that YouTube video, it actually goes on to say how the stuff we learn, how society shapes us, that's way more important to racism than any ancient instinct.
You're saying it's nurture more than nature when it comes to prejudice. Okay, let's unpack that. How do the things we see and the way we grow up actually make us see entire groups of people differently?
Well, think about it. The stories our families tell, what we hear in our communities, even the stuff we watch on TV, it's all got these, like, baked-in ideas about different racial groups. We don't even realize it's shaping how we see the world.
It's like we're born into these stories that we then just, like, absorb.
Exactly. And those biases, they usually come from somewhere, right? Like old conflicts, who had power and who didn't, just cultural stuff that sticks around, and they get everywhere. Think about how movies and TV, even if they're trying not to, they still show certain groups in very particular ways, and boom, harmful prejudice is reinforced.
Wild, right? How much media gets in our heads without us even knowing? Like, we're just soaking it up.
For real. Yeah. And even worse, the YouTube thing pointed this out. It's so easy to take one little experience and go, well, that's what they're all like. Super dangerous. That's how prejudice gets strong.
Truth. I mean, we've all had that one bad interaction, right? And suddenly you're like, nope, never going back to that restaurant, or sadly, it's about actual people.
And that right there is what we got to fight. This is where knowing stuff, education, it actually helps. The more we learn about different cultures, what their history really was, how different people see things, the more you realize you can't just lump everyone together.
So the opposite of prejudice is knowledge.
In a lot of ways, yeah. Like understanding how racism became a thing in our societies, that helps us spot those patterns of, like, oh, this group always gets the short end of the stick, and here's why. Then we can start to change the system itself.
You can't dismantle something if you don't even know how it was built, right?
Exactly. And education, it's not just like textbooks and documentaries. It's about actually talking to people different from you, questioning your own biases, being cool with messing up and learning from it. Lifelong thing, you know.
Sounds less about memorizing facts, more about actually getting it, feeling it, empathy.
100%. And this takes us to another level of messed up when it comes to racism. People using science wrong to back up their bad ideas. Social Darwinism, that whole thing.
Oh, yeah. Social Darwinism.
Oh, yeah.
That's when things get seriously scary. This wasn't just people not knowing better. This was twisting real ideas to make racism sound okay.
Exactly. And that other source you had, Einsteinlarda, Irklarvi Urshilik, that one goes deep on how science got used like this.
So for folks who might not be up on this, Break it down. How'd they twist science to justify racism?
Imagine taking survival of the fittest, which is already kind of brutal, and then you apply it to whole races of people, not just individuals, but entire groups. That's social Darwinism, basically.
So they were saying some races are just born better, meant to rule, and others are like destined to lose.
You got it. And they used this messed up logic to justify colonialism, taking over other countries, slavery, even genocide, wiping out entire groups. It let them pretend that treating people terribly was just, like, natural.
And the worst part is, it wasn't just some fringe idea. Smart people, scientists even bought into it, which made it seem even more true.
Absolutely. And in Danlarda, Irklarve, Irkscheluk, they use a really awful example to show how bad this got. The Nazis in Germany.
Right. The Nazis, they took this social Darwinism to the extreme. The Holocaust, trying to eliminate entire groups of people, Jewish people, Roma, anyone they decided was inferior. It's like a warning sign from history about where this kind of thinking can lead.
And this is where real science steps in and says, nope, not even close. In Sanlarda, Irklarve, Irkscheluk, they're very clear. Human genetics, how our DNA actually works, it doesn't support this idea that there are these fixed, separate races.
So science says superior and inferior races, that's BS.
100% BS. And to really drive this home, we got to talk about Richard Lewontin. This guy was doing groundbreaking stuff, and in Sonnelarda Irklar, the Irkscheluk goes into it.
Lewontin, the genetics guru, I've heard his work is like the foundation for understanding that race is a social thing, not biological. What did he find? So walk me through this. What exactly did Lewontin discover that dismantles this dangerous idea of race?
Lewontin analyzed genetic variations within and between racial groups, and what he found was truly revolutionary. He discovered that there's far greater genetic diversity within racial groups than between them.
Hold on, so you're saying that two individuals classified as belonging to the same race could be more genetically different from each other than they are from someone of a completely different race?
That's exactly what Lewontin's research demonstrated. It completely shattered the notion of distinct, homogeneous racial categories. It showed that the characteristics we often associate with race, like skin color or hair texture, represent a tiny fraction of our overall genetic makeup.
It's like we're looking at the cover of a book and assuming we know the entire story based on its genre, when in reality, there's a whole universe of individual narratives within.
That's a great analogy. It highlights the danger of equating superficial differences with fundamental biological divisions. And the implications of this understanding are profound. If race isn't a biological reality, then it has to be something else entirely.
It's a social construct. We essentially invented it.
Precisely. And if it's something we created, then we have the power to dismantle it. The source, Ansenlarda Irklar ve Irkscheluk, reminds us that while race might not be biologically determined, it has very real social and historical consequences.
This is where things get really interesting, right? We can't just erase history and pretend these categories haven't shaped our societies in profound ways.
Exactly, and this is crucial when we talk about persistent racial disparities. Take health outcomes, for example. Attributing differences in health solely to race ignores the powerful influence of social determinants.
So instead of jumping to conclusions about inherent racial differences, we need to be asking, what are the social and economic factors at play here?
Precisely. Access to health care, quality of education, environmental factors, generational wealth. These are all intertwined with race due to historical and systemic inequalities.
It's like this tangled web, and just because we can't see the threads connecting everything doesn't mean those connections aren't real.
And that's why it's so important to be mindful of the language we use, even when discussing health disparities. Using racial categories without acknowledging these underlying social and economic factors can perpetuate harmful stereotypes.
This has been a lot to process, but incredibly eye-opening. We've gone from the primal fear of the other to the dangers of social Darwinism, all the way to the scientific consensus that race is a social construct.
It's a complex topic, but understanding these different facets is crucial for dismantling racism.
Absolutely. We've learned that racism isn't hardwired into our DNA, but a toxic product of our history and social structures. So as we wrap up today's deep dive, we want to leave you with this question. Knowing that race is a social construct, what concrete steps can you take to challenge racism in your own spheres of influence? Remember, change starts with each of us. Until next time.